Good afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on where you are, and welcome back again with the We Are Millions Hackathon event. We are here today gathered for a panel discussion on the impact of Web3 on the gaming industry. And I would kindly ask our participants to turn on their camera and join us in the stream. For anyone viewing, you can send in your questions via the Discord channel of the event. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. We have today with us, we have Tadej Fiers, CEO of Media Atlas. We have Lawrence Phillip, CEO of Win.com. We have Petra Wilson, CEO of Zombie Orpheus Entertainment. And we have Mick de Graaf from Merit Circle. I would like to give the floor to each of you to give a moment to explain what your companies do and how you're related to the gaming industry. Let's do that alphabetically. So I'm starting with you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Robert. I think you said Lawrence. I'm just going to assume that I'm up. So we're building Win.com, which is going to be the competitive layer of the blockchain gaming industry. And so we're going to be the first play-to-win platform, which has a lot to do with play-to-earn, of course. But the difference here is that it's purely skill games that are mobile-enabled, where basically all mobile games can then wrap themselves inside of our SDK and have people play against other people for asynchronous high-score matching. So I hope that is sort of clear, but what we try to give an edge on for mobile game developers is that obviously it's incredibly expensive to enable your game for blockchain. And it was actually said in the panel just now, in the competition just now as well, that it is quite a steep learning curve and it can be very expensive and time consuming. So we give you 2 lines of code with our Win SDK, which allows you to just wrap your game inside of our SDK and instantly become crypto and NFT enabled. This allows you to also accrue an audience that you otherwise wouldn't have through the prestigious domain of Win.com. And you're okay, everything okay with the connection, I hope, because it's not super stable. And so we right away generate an audience and a viable way for all game developers worldwide to be blockchain enabled and start gathering revenue. Because the shared currency, cryptocurrency, is FTW for the Win, and that is where everything happens inside of our Win ecosystem.
Okay.
So that's a little bit about our project. Yeah.
So and it's mainly focused on mobile gaming, or also other platforms are supported?
It's right now purely on mobile gaming. Yeah.
Okay. Then from the L we go to the M. Mick.
Hello, I'll be a bit quicker. I work for Merit Circle. We do as a smart contract developer, like lead smart contracts. We do a bunch of different stuff. We do investments in the play-to-earn ecosystem. We do play-to-earn scholarships management, and we're now expanding to multiple verticals, like building a game. We've recently launched Eden Horde. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Thank you. Petra.
So Zombie Orpheus and or the Fantasy .network is a community-owned co-creative platform for crowdfunding and producing and distributing independent fantasy and science fiction media. I am currently tasked by that community with exploring the blockchain space to find a way of fostering that co-creative culture and monetization for the community of that co-creative culture in the blockchain space.
Cool. Thank you. Tadej?
Hello, I'm Tadej Fiers. I'm CEO of Media Atlas. We were producing real-time animation for the national television for many years. We also have like a motion capture studio. been working on games like for quite some time, but it's just like Web 2, right? The old school. I've been researching the privacy aspects and how to build NFT empowered game for quite some time. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Now, I will be talking as least as possible during this call, I expect. But I'd like to explain a bit to the audience that we, of course, are going to discuss impact of Web3 on the gaming industry. When we're talking about Web3, but it's a container term, of course. Over the years, there are dozens of new innovations which have been released under the same, let's say, terminology in this case. So it has impact both on the technology stack as well as potential business models, as well as onboarding, as well as governance, you name it. So with that, I'm wondering if, just to give it a generic introduction, would you, as developers in this space, consider the addition that Web3 and what distributed models have started to offer since the advent of blockchains and partially before? Is it a model is it a part of your stack to build the game around? Or is it part of your stack, and is it an addition to traditional gameplay models? What would you say? Or does it open up new avenues of totally new, unrealized gameplay before?
Yeah, so if I may, I think that it's going to be fundamental for the future going forward, because I think what's bothersome to many people is that there's a third-party dependency on almost everything that we do in our daily lives. So if the same applies in all our digital lives as well, this is something to be disrupted. This is something to be changed. People can start taking ownership of literally everything that they do in the online realm. And so for us, we have centralized all our core values around this, and we try to make sure that across the user journey, there's no moment in which you have to give up your ownership of your assets or anything you do online. You simply retain the private keys that allow access for all the wealth that you have on the platform, for example, as well as the NFTs. So that's kind of how we see it. The idea is decentralization, and I also see a future in which eventually an incentive such as ours or anyone else may start off by developers doing the development, but eventually it can migrate towards an open source realm where everyone is building the exact way in which they would like to see the outcome be built. So these are future things that I find very exciting, and I think it's important that we as developers lay a fundamental groundwork to be able to pave the way towards this type of future, where everyone is not depending on all sorts of third parties all the time. So this is kind of how I see Web3, more independence, more decentralization.
Anyone would like to respond to that?
I think it's also great for the developers, because nowadays there's like a lot of centralized intermediaries when you build a game. Like there's the publisher, there's like the platform where people can download it, there's like the payment providers and everything. And if you have this common shared infrastructure which is open, then suddenly you cut out a lot of middlemen, which allows you to actually, even if your game is not a mega hit, to still make some money instead of being poor until you hit that hit, because being a game developer is really hard. And they currently they are struggling because of these predatory platforms. Like you need to be a massive hit, or you simply cannot live from it.
Would you say that would be offering a new business model to an existing product, or for these indie studios, for instance? Or would you say that because we have now a new infrastructure, people will have to use it eventually to be able to monetize on their projects?
Yeah, like in some situations, it can create new business models, but also mainly like previous business models which could not survive in the current market can now actually survive. So like because the cost will be lower.
I see you nodding, Petra.
I mean, there's certainly something to be said for the advantage from an artistic point of view in terms of relating to your audience. You know, it's a lot more beneficial to creative work to be able to directly monetize, you know, to the audience. Anytime that you have to introduce a middleman, you sort of lose control over where you get exposure and the depth of interaction that you're able to manage with your audience and your customer. And so that we're definitely seeing like a lot of projects that are benefiting from capitalizing on a small group of individuals in order to build something that's sustainable for a small group of artists. Those kinds of things are proliferating. There's just, you know, I see also though that there are a lot of other systemic resources that larger organizations have access to in that reality, and that there's another side to that advantage. Um, as a smaller group, there's almost a need for federation with other small groups in order to, you know, address the nascent issues with security in the space. Yeah. As when I look at the blockchain, I do not see necessarily freedom and opportunity, but I'm reminded of the giant warehouse-sized buildings in East Pennsylvania and other places in my country and other countries where massive data farms are being run continuously to collate all of this metadata. You know, already in the centralized system, but in certain blockchain models, um, that's already globally exposed, right? So I don't know. As we're building, you know, as game designers, it occurs to me that we have like a unique ability and responsibility almost to try and figure out, you know, what are the drawbacks and trade-offs and the economy in this space, and that we're uniquely like sort of um, positioned to help communities that need to interact with. Um, I mean, almost every incentivized system is a gamified system, right?
Would you say that what Web3, let's say the blockchains in general, would offer to support this as a part of your stack? Look, I remember the map developing in the 90s, mostly for games back then. Game developing in general was, let's say, more accessible for hobbyists first as well. And you saw a rise of indie developers in the zeros, especially with the new distribution channels like Steam opening up for that as well. Now, I'm wondering, with these new technologies popping up and offering new forms of monetization, but also support and security, has the barrier for indie developers has gone up with this because has become more complex, or would you say it's lower because they offer more finite solutions? What would you say today?
Well, for sure, it's another level of complexity that's added, you know, to the whole production process, right? So now not only that you have to have like, you know, good artists, you know, animators and riggers and, you know, musicians and the whole management staff and everything, right? So now you have to add additional part, which is blockchain, right? And now you have to start to think about, you know, the crypto economics and the economics of your token or whatever token will go across the metaverse. Right, so it adds something that, let's say, Web 2 technology or 2.0 studios are not accustomed to, because their technology stack is basically version 2.0, right? So now they will have to start think how to implement all these parts together and build the game dynamics on top of it, and of course doing the content for the game. So it brings a lot of additional concern, right? It takes some away, like, you know, maybe the cybersecurity is a little bit less of the issue because you rely on everything is relied on the blockchain. So if everything is done correctly, then you believe into mathematics and cryptography, which right now, if you do like a multiplayer game, you have big concern about cybersecurity, right? And hacking and to prove, you cannot prove with the old technology, you cannot prove the ownership of these new assets. So I think that the products will have to change. And I don't see the proper way to change the existing products to adapt them to this new token economics and all these, play turn mechanics and all this kind of different stuff and opportunities that come with using this new technology. I think that we have to start anew, right? That's my opinion.
Would that include a new generation of gamers who is who will grow up with gameplay intertwined with, in this case, compensation?
Either new generation, because it will be very difficult. It will be very difficult, to just tell existing gamers, oh, now you have to play this game because it's NFT, right? It's NFT based and you have this crypto economics inside. This will be very difficult. And I think this is actually wrong to do it in this way. You should not push anybody to use some new technology, right? We should give them at least an option that this exists. And if you take a look at current titles, big titles, they don't need no crypto economics inside. We have these big open world games that are coming out, and they have like in-game currencies or whatever, right? And these games, they don't need this kind of additional complexity. But if you want to create something new that will maybe model the real world economics and have this fungibility between the games and communication and collaboration in this metaverse, however you call it, then the best technology to use is blockchain and NFTs. There is no other way.
You mentioned interoperability between metaverses there. I'm wondering, Lawrence, for instance, you're building an ecosystem in which developers can, let's say, offer their games directly. I'm wondering, is interoperability something which is part of your approach to the market and what you want to offer to developers? Is it even a viable option? Is it also something to discuss?
Yeah, so are you referring to the interoperability of two metaverses, for example, or three, or
Well, there have been, for instance, proposals made about, okay, could I export my NFTs from one metaverse to another one? Basically from one game to another one if it's not run by the same company.
Yeah, so in response to that, I think that bridging is going to be increasingly important, and to make sure that the future is multi-chain. But I believe that we're not there yet. So there's no real seamless way to go from AVAX to Ethereum and play the same games on Win.com, for example. But these are things we always keep our ear on the ground on to see how this is going to be viable, because of course all chains need to be able to coexist. So that is one part. But then when it comes to metaverses, there's NFT plays where people merge their dog NFTs with the, person NFTs, right? And then they create the universe by merging some NFT plays. I think that this is all very early stage stuff, and that of course eventually there's going to be some real powerhouses that come along and they say, this is the ecosystem, why would you need anything else? At the same time, there's plenty going to be around for the casual developers that don't have large teams, that may not have a large platform or ecosystem. But I think it's all going to eventually be consolidated in a couple of spaces where people are going to access the things that they enjoy most. I hope that answers the question. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the barrier to entry for indie gaming spaces, where you were asking if it went up or down. The barrier to entry has become more complex or less complex. That's what I understood. And what I did, I did months or half a year of research into the indie gaming space. And then I realized some of these guys that are working out of their basement or their attic are able to produce better games than some of these large studios, which is super damn exciting. And they do it with tools like Unity. They mash it up with some sound effects for $1 in envato.com, and boom, what you got together is a thrilling game. So sometimes it's truly the creativity, Petra, I would like to say, that really, brings a joy and amazement to some of these games. And I would also like to make a side note about some of these other games where we have the cell phone and all we have to do is swipe. I think that's the dumbing down a little bit of our gaming ecosystem. At the same time, it seems to be a status quo that's slowly but surely forming right now. So these are concerns that I have. I'm curious to see where a game can allow us to feel like we're leveling up a little bit, like there's a thrill, like we're not in the anxiety of trying to be as fast as possible, trying to evade as many blocks as possible, what have you. It would be interesting to really, that's what we'd like to push for ASAP, which is to understand how we can offer added value to everyone that engages with the platform. I used to have a tremendous thrill when I would do passive farming in a game called Ragnarok, a manga type game. And I would do passive farming in the night, and I would wake up and I would see what had been farmed on my little farm. And similar things and dynamics were orchestrated recently by an NFT game called wolf.game. And so there you share your wolf or you share your sheep, right? And you would be able to collect the wolf, and then that would be worth money because it had its own currency. And these plays are really the type of things that kind of bring the child out from within us, right? And allow us to enjoy a game to its full extent. I'm not saying that any of these games that I mentioned do this to the full extent, but this is what I really love about gaming in general, to have it be a nice pastime where you feel energized and fulfilled afterwards. So it would be nice to see how that comes together in the future.
Yeah, if I can just add, I think that the tools that we have now, like blockchain and Swarm as a decentralized storage, right? So this all gives us basically permissionless creativity, right? So the studio can now use Swarm to distribute their game, use the blockchain to do the economics. Of course, they still have to use different channels to get to the users, but everything is here and available, and you're no longer dependent on walled gardens. And this is actually quite exciting, right? Because now you can do a lot of stuff without to ask anybody for permission. You don't have to pay a distribution license anymore. You can do it directly, and it's amazing, right? The opportunities that are open. Right?
I fully agree with that. And I think that little by little, we did see all of a sudden a tendency where people started buying up source codes and then put a token in there and all of a sudden say, this is the next hot shit, so to speak, right? And this is not exactly how it should be, because a token should have added value to its game, which becomes quite complex, which is what you also hinted to. So when does a token become relevant and when is a token really unnecessary at all? I think this is a debate that can carry much further than just 1 hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether or not it took
There is maybe one interesting, I don't know who said it, but some guy on Twitter said it, that after crypto, everything else is boring, and crypto is also like a game, right? It is a game. So now we as game developers, we are playing the game within the game, or making a game within the existing game, and enabling basically players that can play this meta game even when they are not playing the game, right? So if we take like the farming or all these kind of different crypto stuff, and we combine this with the game mechanics, it becomes really, really like interesting, right? And the modeling of the space or the modeling of whatever you want to do becomes even more interesting, right? And of course, if you want to do like an arcade game, there is no need to use no token economics. But if you want to have like some connection with the real life or do some more modeling or simulation of the existing world, then again, so the creativity is the end, right? And you can do, like how to say. You can get the essence of this space. You can get the essence of life inside the virtual life, right? And you can have simulation of, I don't know, flying around, and you can own that plane, and you can sell that plane, and you can get like a virtual license for flying that plane, and all this kind of stuff can be now modeled. And you can say, okay, I spend so much time in the simulator, this has to count for something, right? So now if I want to start flying a plane, I already know a lot of stuff. And I have the proof that I already did this in the simulator, for example, the flight simulator, similar games. Or imagine having like a serious game when you, for example, do a game about the training, how to fix a machine, how to fix a car. Right? So now you have this basically game of fixing an engine, and you know how to fix it, and then you come to the real engine, you use the technology like VR or augmented reality, and you see this machine and you know how to fix it, because you already did it like in virtual space. Okay, now you have the wrench and dirty hands, but you are getting very close to this, that you can actually get real training in the virtual world.
Yeah, this is actually tested for doctors in training to virtually start operating.
It gets a little bit more complicated with the doctors, right?
Yeah.
Because the simulation of the soft tissue and where are you in the space. But still, right? Once we get good with detection of the soft tissue and how it moves, this will go even further, right? So, but if we concentrate on the rigid bodies that are not soft tissues, this is solvable now, right? So NVIDIA and Omniverse and digital twins, all these things exist, and they are good, and they reduce the process of planning and optimization of manufacturing processes, like by a factor, huge factor.
I'm wondering, Mick, in the projects that are pitched in at Merit, have you seen some who actually try to do this, like model society, basically?
Sorry, have they tried to model society?
Yeah, as in what today mentioned with digital twins, and the fact that we can actually recreate experiences from real world, working towards potential achievements in real life.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the stuff we're seeing is still relatively simple, right? Like the blockchain game titles, like they're not they don't compete like in terms of quality with like AAA games yet. So yeah, I don't think we've seen a lot of like MMORPGs and stuff. That's
Oh,
hopefully.
I saw one. They were you sign up online, you connect your wallet, and they tag your address as part of the creation of the NFT. And so basically, they use that data to construct your digital twin, which begins to be tied to that NFT. And they call it your digital soul. And then the idea is you have this digital soul, so you can sell your digital soul to others, or you can purchase digital souls. You can collect them. Okay. And these digital souls are NFTs that are going to collect all of the information about your address and its activity. That's a pretty twisted game. Some artists that I know were reacting to the idea of this digital twin, and it's a little bit, pardon, but the statement that they made was, No more raping my digital soul.
Oh,
So, I mean, this is a real consideration. I've got three sort of like case studies I'd like to sort of posit. These are things that are currently going on in the blockchain space, games that are being developed right now. And I'm just like looking at this from that kind of perspective, but also in terms of the tokenomics and the economic propositions of a game that's trying to be sustainable in the metaverse as a monetization for a community, sustainability. At the very least, profitability maybe, but sustainability is preferable for a game, right? So Gripner. Now this is a D&D clone blockchain game where you'll be able to get loots, just like the loot contracts for characters that you will mint, that you will be able to engage with in certified DM sessions of play within the blockchain. So it's like DM's Guild, basically, or like organized play, where certified facilitators who have NFTs as certified DMs.
DMs, you mean Dungeon Masters, right?
Right.
For the viewers.
Yeah. This company though is being launched by a person who just retired from this digital marketing firms that what they do is they create these watermarks in audio files so that when your audio files are remixed into other video or audio streams and they're played anywhere on the internet in Web 2, this centralized server flags that activity, and they can actually, for example, tell the politician who used your song that they're not allowed to do that anymore in that case, or find copyright violations or third-party distribution that hasn't been properly monetized within the recoupment structure for the financing of the sound file. But the idea that they've got that kind of machine learning AI analysis that reaches all the corners of Web 2 for any of their audio productions, and that they're going to monetize system that attaches a player in their world to a unique character and tracks all of their purchase behavior within their game, um, both within the metaverse that they're creating, but also because of interoperability, right, throughout multiple metaverses and encroaching into those spaces in terms of the analytics that are capable for being derived from like a hexadecimal code that we buried in the XOR for the hashing of the token algorithm that will uniquely identify it when they run a scan on a particular endpoint, that they have access to that, right? So that's case one. Case two, we've got Studio 6, and they're launching a metaverse game which is AR enabled. So they're working with Pokemon Go directly, the Lightship AR system, and they're integrating their blockchain games directly with Lightship's Web 2 enabled mobile device technology for AR. And this means that consumers who have purchased their W2s, their NFTs, that's another use for NFTs, by the way. Think about sharing your W2. Anyway, so yeah, they show up with their NFTs in a predefined geographic location, utilizing predefined mobile endpoints in the local space, which have accessibility for all of the telecommunication networks that service all of the Web 2 clients that inform all of the streaming services like Netflix, Edgecast, and Google Cloud, etc. In terms of like consumption for media statistics, you know. And we all know in the media industry that Nielsen ratings, right? I mean, that is the problem. It happened way before Web 1, right? We were trying to get away with that in Xanadu, right? We never made it, but we're headed there, I think. Case 3. So there's a game with Blockchain Alliance. They're setting up this validation service, and right now my brain's just kind of dropping on it. But it's a game simulation service. What they do is they set up and they simulate your game in its tokenomics. They run it through CAD. They set up simulations. They test boundary positions and inflection points within your models, and they give you feedback so that you know how your performance of your game's economic model is going to be in relation to the blockchain that it's sitting on top of, for example, in terms of those cash flows, equity flows, sorry, token flows, information flows. So in that sense, they do like a sort of final test before you go live with your game, but also after that, they maintain an ongoing service where they track all of your activity for your community so that your community can be aware of the extent of its arbitrage opportunities, both internally and externally in relation to the global blockchain. We have things like flashbots, and Token Engineering Commons has enabled a lot of these simulations to go live across blockchains, and those aren't, centralized in any way, and we don't necessarily have a way of knowing who's running those kinds of simulations. Reading an article in Google feed, my Google feed, suggested I read an article about the opinions of the NSA on setting up Cademelia structure, and reading through it was like a catalog of like, yeah, this is native in Swarm. Yes, this is native. Of course, we would do that in Swarm. That's automatic. No, that's not even. You can't turn that off in Swarm. Like,
well, how do you? Where are you heading with this, Fred?
so those are 3 different cases.
Okay.
And in each of those cases, we can see. I mean, I hope I made the argument for each of those different cases that certain amount of enthusiasm and economic inducement, alignment, a certain amount of economic alignment for certain people who have, and traditionally in many situations, like in games and art, there are certain disadvantages and advantages at play in the traditional publishing industry. So economic incentives for rushing into technologies that may or may not attract, onboard people into a system that is not clearly secure in certain situations. I mean, obviously, like Pokemon Go integrations with the telecommunication systems for events for small batch NFTs are gonna, that's gonna dox every single participant. I mean, that's an obvious one, right? But then there are these other complex issues about wide simulations, flashbots, that sort of thing, being run against a game economy in order to derive derivatives. I mean, what was it? I was in the metagame, and there was a DJ there, and he suggested, okay, we're going to create these NFTs about your game, and you're going to be doing the performances, people watching them, but what if somebody was to set up a betting ring on the side to bet on, which one of these, artists or players was going to come out on top? And, I realized I have very little control over that in a real way, and that's one of the reasons I ended up at Swarm. But yeah, I think these are the real issues that we have to address as we're creating this technology, because there's so much of Web 2 that is co-opted by a system that is clearly not working to everyone's benefit.
Yeah,
I'm
wondering.
That's actually a real danger, right? So the gaming and the gambling, there is a clear distinction between one is skill-based, one is basically betting. So how do we avoid this, that somebody does not come and makes from your skill-based game a betting platform, or makes a betting platform that's all present, right? Because then you fall under the regulation of the of gambling.
I mean, let's create an NFT game where I just create NFTs of all the valedictorians, and you get to buy a valedictorian, and then based on their performance in VC, in Web3 or whatever, and their market capitalization, you have a rarity score that will allow you to value your graduate NFT. Like, this is madness.
I'd like to hear the response from Lawrence on this, and also have a question for Mick about this.
So yeah, DeFi obviously is rampant when it comes to gambling houses, and you could argue that much of trading and how it works with insider trading is just incredibly unfairly structured today. So that's one part. When it comes to skill gaming in general, you have to prove that you are a skill game and that the randomness has been taken out of the game. Otherwise, decentralized gatekeepers such as Apple or Google would not allow you to get anywhere or featured anywhere. So these are very simple points, like you need to be a valid skill game in order to get adopted anywhere, right, to a mass audience. I wanted to also touch a little bit on the topic of bringing real life into the mix inside of our world of tech, no logic. which says it all, right? It's kind of life devoid in many parts. And so what we did and what's going to be launched in, I think, Q4 this year on our platform would be purposeful gaming. This means that as you level up on the platform, eventually you're going to accrue purpose points, and those purpose points can be allocated to cleaning up a pound from the ocean or having a tree planted with the precise geolocation fed back to you inside of an application. And that's not to say that then we have created as a team a big relation to reality, because of course you're still playing games as this is happening, but it does at least create a link and a relation. And from there, we'd like to build. What Tadej was also referencing was, how do you give skill sets? How do you actually allow a mechanic to all of a sudden know a machine or a motor through digital interactivity? So I've been studying that as well to understand how do you bring added value to the person that interacts with your platform, because in a way, you owe it to them to make sure that their attention is used in a meaningful way. And so what we have come up thus far is the purposeful gaming element, which we would like to expand bigly. The reason being because I started diving deep into charities and then realized that most of them are basically money laundering hubs, because they buy big buildings and they don't necessarily have full transparency. So innovation can be brought to the charity game as well in a very huge way, and we're looking to do that. But this is longer term. This is later on the roadmap, and it's something that we can fairly easily implement inside of our application. So that's where I see some of these relations to reality when it comes to blockchain activity. I have a very, very tough time believing that if we were to believe Zuckerberg, we're going to be laying in the corner of the room while having a VR headset on, completely entertained inside of our little metaverse, interacting socially with other people. I do not vote necessarily towards this new reality that they're trying to have us believe that this would be a level up from our lives that we can all just celebrate as well. So yeah, this is kind of nuance where I come from. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, imagine having like an AI that creates whatever, basically learns all the time what kind of virtual clothes you want to have for your avatar, right? And you just generates. It learns from your actions. It learns from, what you prefer. You prefer red car or whatever, right? So it constantly learns. It's constantly training and just producing the clothes for your avatar, basically forcing you that you will buy these clothes. Right? They have. So few days ago there was a talk, and the question was: is AI-generated content art? I mean, is it Gucci? If Gucci made the AI which learns from you, is it still Gucci's or whomever, or is it yours? Right? So then the model of selling skins should not be present, because you actually put your data inside, and that AI is creating skins what you prefer, right? But they will take the money. You gave them the information, what you like. The AI will create this specifically for you, right? And one day you will say, oh, I love this. This is exactly what I want, right? But does it have value? Right? And that's actually a big issue, right? So,
well, yeah, I mean, I would expand that issue.
Yeah, you are being like part of the collaboration, but you get nothing out of it, right?
Yeah, and the same happens on the global scale with general consumerism.
Yeah.
We're also being programmed to consume these products, right? So now they're just taking it to the metaverse and saying, okay, have your Nikes or have your Adidas in your custom avatar and be cool in the metaverse as well. So this is kind of, I don't know, but it's interesting endeavor.
I wouldn't mind if the Adidas would make me, the shoes that I prefer, but they are physical shoes that I can wear. But in digital world, the skin is, just some electrons. They basically have no physical value, but the moment when dopamine in my body releases, and the more I will consume this, it will be more and more difficult to satisfy me myself will be more difficult to satisfy me, and I will just want to have more and more and more. And and then that's the collapse of the society.
Today, the question is, are you satisfying yourself, or will one day society ask you to wear the right suit for your application interview within the metaverse? If you don't have it, will you get invited?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just peer pressure all over again. Let's not advance. Let's just fall back into peer pressure and being cool for the other guys instead of like doing something that allows us to level up in life in general. So, I mean, these are interesting tidbits because all of that is not progression, it's regression.
Exactly, right? So the purpose of the game, when you come home from your hard work or from your school and you sit on the couch and you turn on your gaming console and you just spend 1 hour or whatever time to enjoy yourself and have a good time, so this time, this will become something that will profile you and force you to spend money. And that's not okay, right?
But that's already happening in like normal.
Of course it's
gaming.
happening, of course.
If you see
With all the A/B testing in the games and all this stuff. So they are constantly profiling you, but it will get even worse. Right?
Mm-hmm. I think like in blockchain gaming, like you can become part owner of the game itself, right? It's much harder to own some tech stocks and actually own part of the game. But in blockchain games, we're seeing governance structures where people could like help decide where the game is going, like which new features should be implemented, right? Like a much more direct relationship between the gamer and the developer. Like the only example I can think of in traditional games, I think it would be RuneScape, right? Where they would do like these polls on the forum to decide where they would take like the old version of RuneScape. And people responded really, really well to that. And I think if you have like some system which makes it easier, that's gonna be really cool, because then you build games people actually like, right?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with when people like a game. That's exactly what we want, right? So you want to build something that people will like. It just depends how you will abuse these people, right? And once you start combining the Web3 technologies with the old technologies, and then you start adding the AI and all these, these little parts, then it can get very dangerous, right?
I'd like to talk about that, about potential threats here. And we earlier discussed already the potential of the, let's say, the gambling side. People might start speculating on the success of your game and your token, and that might ruin the internal economy, maybe even. I was wondering, Mick, have you seen any examples of that yet? Because I knew you were involved with PyDAO as well in the past.
Well, I think like a lot of these blockchain games, for example, Axie Infinity, you cannot really play it if you don't have some money, right? Like to establish a team in Axie Infinity, I believe, like I don't play it myself, but I believe it costs like $500 or something, or like up to $1,500. So like, yeah, like because you built in this financial aspect, like stuff will get really expensive, right? And that's also like feeding into this positive feedback loop where this stuff gets more expensive, more people want to play it to create the characters. And yeah, I think we need to see games where there's a more healthy relationship between being able to play the game and actually, like, people want to own stuff to flex, right? Like in the old days of RuneScape, you had like party hats and stuff. Like these things, if you would convert them to US dollars at the time, they would be $500 hats. Like it's nothing new. People used to do it all the time, but I could still play the game without actually owning those things. Like, of course, I would always want them, but I didn't have the money at the time. So I think, yeah, like introducing these financial aspects can be a threat because they basically exclude a lot of players. So I think that's a threat. Yeah.
Another threat Petra mentioned was that basically, if we, let's say, require people to use NFTs and require them to log in with their MetaMask, for instance, that we connect them to, well, for instance, real world information as location, otherwise we're basically doxing them. There's a question which came up in Discord just now. It says, okay, how do we protect the privacy of children in the metaverse as they play games. What are the risks we can see there, and how can we counter them? Is there perhaps a room here for zero knowledge proof systems, for instance, in place for this, or is that an option even?
Yeah, I think like to some extent, like once you tie your blockchain identity to your real one, you cannot untie them. But until that point, like to use a lot of these applications, you don't even have to submit an email address or a password, like no phone number, no phone name, like no registration at all. So like to some extent, it's like your private information is much safer. Like if I use stuff in DeFi, like nobody has my identity information, right? Like there's not much that can leak there. So I think, yeah, of course, like if you're like a guy with, I don't know, $1 million ape, you need to be careful, right? But if you're just playing around with like a few $100, then, you know, it can go wrong.
Well, I'm
Then
saying,
of course your personal information getting worth far more than the actual money you held in that game, of course.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's true that like as a wealthy person, you need to protect your information, etc., because you have a substantial amount of capital wealth to. But if all of the it's a question of scale. Like the impact or the risk to the one individual may be minimal in their care versus their risk of a large amount of money. Maybe they should be more careful. But the risk to a community of people is cumulative, right? Because the risk of any is the risk of all. So it's like. For the community, it's like each one of these small risks added up. If all of them are compromised, if 50% of those people are compromised, then all of a sudden you've got a different issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm speaking to. It's like personal control, not just they say you're not your keys, not your wallet, or not your keys, not your crypto, or something like that. But it's like it's in the blockchain, money is information is money in that sense, like literally. And
exactly.
so
The information is money, right? So
not your information.
exactly. The blockchain, right? So the properties of public blockchains, so if I go a little bit back and say, okay, so we can track all my transactions, right? And now in this metaverse, and we use the Web3 technology, so I can mint the NFT, I can mint my digital car, I can mint my digital skin, I can do whatever, right? So all these transactions are on public blockchain, right? And again, if you do some kind of analytics, you can track the funds, where they are going, even if you go to the basically mixer and you go to cross-chain or do whatever, you can track this. Now imagine you're living in a metaverse and everybody knows that you like the red car, right? Or whatever information there is. And this is very dangerous. And I think that everything should be like zero knowledge. Everything. Should be
I think
like
it's an interesting point.
Complete voidness of the information.
Well, I mean, if that's already dangerous, then how dangerous is it today that your app, your phone creator knows everything about you as well, or your government knows everything about you as well, right? So we already live in this reality, and I don't think much is going to change in the Web3 world. I mean, we as business owners and developers, we always try to do everything to protect privacy, but God knows what type of backdoors exist that already reveal all the information about someone anyway, right? So this is kind of the reality that we're served with right now. Our data is being used against us most of the time to harness more power and to manipulate us into all sorts of conduct that we think is natural by our own wish. And turns out that, I mean, revealing Cambridge Analytica or any of the other studies, they were able to steer with the changing of a couple of colors, the elections in different nations. So, we can't really pretend like there's a big battle for privacy going on when all our data is already on the street, no? So that's also
we can fight it ourselves, right?
Up for debate.
But that's why we have to build this kind of technology, so that it won't be possible. It has to be built in that way that nobody can know, only you. So
right, but it's all on if it's on a blockchain and it's basically a public ledger, then there's already like an interference with your overall privacy, I would say. But maybe you have a different.
If only there was like a temporary ledger that was naturally built to be lossy and delete first design, then we might have a way of registering transactions within the community in order to empower the community to transact as a group via batching transactions to a blockchain, and thereby through decomposition and recomposition sort of like encrypt within the community interaction. I'm just thinking single owner chunks, PSS, book of swap.
Yeah, so I think that's beautiful, and I think it bodes well for the future. But look what happened to Zcash, Monero, and the centralized exchanges that then cut off all the access to them. So there's also like a battle going on when it comes to that. When it comes to worldwide adoption of these, Swarm, for example, which you were pitching, I would assume, then yeah, there's going to be people that are not too happy about this type of thing. So I'm super interested in seeing what happens in the public sphere, who is saying what, and what is the true undertone. What if all of a sudden Bittrex, at the time a US exchange, starts banning all these privacy coins, and then more follow, then there's like a trickle down effect, and God knows where it's coming from exactly, right? So it's interesting reality that we share here.
Yeah, I mean, if I look only to this as a like a value of value like Monero or whatever, right? But I actually don't care so much about the privacy coins as I care about privacy of personal information, and this can be built differently. It doesn't have to have exchange, right? You can actually do your own exchange, and it's not the point in the money. It's point in the data itself, not in the transaction and moving value, but it's pointing in having the data that's yours, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And then you need to always make sure that there's no central point of failure, that it can never go down or offline, and that it works. I mean, and is heavily adopted by the masses. Those are some of the pitfalls and the hurdles to overcome. But then, yes.
I have a question, which is, we already mentioned that there's new opportunities for co-ownership at one point. Mick mentioned this as part of for the end users, as part of their experience, and that they can co-decide, for instance, what's happening with the development of a game. As globally, if we look at, for instance, Europe, with the anti-money laundering directives being updated for cryptocurrencies and other virtual assets, is the gaming market, which is developing with tokens on chain systems, at risk of this rise in requirements for compliance as well? And would, for instance, end users be at risk if they co-own a game? Mick?
I think like most of the times with these regulations, the responsibility does not fall down to the user. So if you yourself are doing stuff, then you're not having much of an issue. And if you have like credible decentralization, there is no central authority which needs to obey by any regulator, right? Like I'm very, very, very anti-regulation in most situations. I think like if you build stuff which is sufficiently decentralized, like there's no regulation should not apply, only on and off ramps, right? So I think yeah, like as long as we're able to build economies which are not connected, like who don't rely on these on and off ramps, then I don't see much regulatory capture. Like these things need to hold value besides being able to convert them to fiat, right? That's why they like. But yeah, it's a threat, but I don't think it will actually kill it, right? That's like Europa will kill itself by basically killing all innovation for the 21st century.
I look at the others.
I mean, there's no reason that like it's like crypto gives us this opportunity to sort of split up the different utilities of monetary units, right? So the idea is perhaps that maybe there's also different kinds of interactions that should be mediated by those different kinds of utilities, and that produces sort of these layers and different ways of interacting. So I mean, for an educational situation, for a developmental, for children, for uh, possibly illegal in some countries and not in others, debatable political position, communications, that sort of thing. Like Swarm is really good. And then on the other side, we have sort of like the real things where there's like we all have a vested interest in knowing like distribution of uranium. Like if we could like make a little bit more blockchain in the distribution of uranium, that would be great. Professional artists who are interested in trying to monetize their work and recoup the financing or cost that went into, you know, uh, creating that, they have a vested interest. So again, it comes against these alignments of these different positions that you can take in terms of the different utilities of the information that you're actually sharing, right? And so we need to really refine where those intersections lie in order to focus a particular utility around those different combinations that are possible. And the other thing is, I think, as game developers, I think we've got a real responsibility to educate people about these particular considerations in terms of interacting. As they're learning from these games, they can really learn about the interaction. I mean, Dark Forest was a really popular game, but it's a very important game
It still
in
is.
blockchain space. It still is, right? Resistance will be too, I think. I mean, it already may be, but it's real. It's real. Anyway, I really think like this is where we can really help people in terms of as they're entering their space, helping them learn about those things and making them exposing those items, because as people work through that process, they will figure out for us, like as a community, we will figure out what are the benefits of and what are where is the sweet point for that balance. I think that will come about. I don't think it's been defined yet, but we need to expose it to people, because if we don't, then we'll never find that balance. It will just be consumed by somebody else. And as game designers, we know, like scarcity tactics. I mean, everybody should know that's black hat game design, right? Like, there's certain ways to build these ramps, but there's also like necessities to have a certain amount of unpredictability in a game in order to make it rewarding to play. So we had to balance these
Yeah,
things.
I actually very much agree with this, and I think also that maybe the best way, in this metaverse is not that your tokens are actually tied to the fiat. I think if your game produces tomatoes and my game produces potatoes, right? And we agree that one tomato is one potato, and we swap this, now you have one tomato and I have one potato, right? That this shouldn't be regulated. Why should this be regulated? It has nothing to do with nothing. I mean, it's just like potato and tomato, and we swapped it, and that's it. You cannot impose tax on this. How can you impose tax on this? It shouldn't be regulated.
Regulators
But
will find a way to
immediately
tax this.
when you start selling the potatoes, then the tax comes, right? You start selling it for the fiat, then it has to be regulated, because otherwise you will get all kind of tricky behaviors which you actually don't want, right? So will the metaverse will be tied to the fiat? I mean, immediately you do that, you will be regulated, and that's okay. But the true metaverse, at the end of the day, when all this shit and we all go over it, and we as a civilization, we advance, the only thing that will be important will be tomato and potato, not the fiat. The fiat is just a tool, and it's quite shitty one.
So from the views of the regulators, of course, it's important for them to look at what where the potential for a leak is. So if I trade a tomato for potato, for a carrot, for a Bitcoin, and then from a Bitcoin to fiat, then there's a problem. So somewhere there has to be that they want to be intervened.
But you can never go to field.
Yeah, true, but that's perhaps something for another discussion. Because we've come up on the hour, and I'd like to ask you one more question to round off the discussion. Lawrence, you mentioned that you've seen a Wolf game, for instance. Quite intriguing new mechanisms were introduced there. I was intrigued by Loom on Phantom not so long ago. I was wondering, for each of you, for the viewers, could you share one game which has piqued your interest recently or is upcoming, which you would recommend people to check out? And not for monetization reasons, but to check out because it looks like a nice game which can actually look like fun.
You mean like AA, AAA game, or
doesn't know? Let's
or whatever
related to Web3, but a game you would recommend to check out.
I actually
make
like
it make it a bit more harder. Let's not make it a game that you created.
I actually like the rarity. It lives on Phantom. You know it?
I've heard about it,
Yeah.
but I thought it was similar to Loom, but I could be mistaken.
It is. But I like it how Andre put it out, and then community took over. And that's really interesting how, community started building the interfaces, starting to extend it in one way or another. And then the funding came, and then the community got funded by I think the foundation actually founded them, to continue developing that base layer, which it all started with. And then people started to wrap the tokens, because at start they were NFTs and you cannot swap NFTs so simply. So they made like an ERC wrapper, so you can use the Uniswap kind of exchanges, indexes. And yeah, I think that
it's a real community effort.
Yeah, I love it how community took over and is driving it forward.
Okay, Petra or Lawrence, so you tuning in.
Yeah, my take would be I like to study Sunflower Land, which is on Polygon. So basically they had issues scaling and they saturated the entire Polygon chain, but then Polygon stepped in and helped them out to make sure that it became scalable once more and wouldn't saturate their whole blockchain. So I like seeing that just as a case study, and also because we're working with closely with Polygon ourselves. And so, yeah, that's one that I would urge you to check out. When I played it for an hour or two, I realized I wasn't thoroughly entertained, but it was nice to see how they did the on-chain dynamics. And I believe that some parts of these are going to be our future gaming sphere. So that's why it's kind of interesting to look into it. Yeah.
Also very interesting. Yes, I like it a lot, actually.
Petra?
I preach a lot, but I'm addicted to games. So I've got kind of some issues, lots of issues with some of these things that I've discussed earlier today. There's 3 different case studies, but I'm following those games right now because I can't wait to see what happens with them. I've been working on trying to build similar things and have held back in certain ways, trying to work on some of those problems that I described. These guys are moving full speed ahead, and I have a relative privilege in being already really doxable. So I'm gonna follow Gripner here for a minute and see what they do with organized play in the metaverse. Yeah.
Okay. Mick?
I'm looking forward to Footium. It's like an online soccer manager type game where you can create clubs, and your clubs have a youth division, and if you perform better, you get more players, you can trade the things. Like I used to play this online soccer manager thing a bit, and I thought it was really fun, and like being able to actually play it. And I also have friends who are like very into football or soccer, which part of the world you're from. Then yeah, I think it's very interesting, and to relive those old times, maybe trade some cards in the process. Yeah.
Cool. I'd like to thank you all for participating today, for coming to the panel and being part of the We Are Millions event, and with your sharing your knowledge. this stream will end and will be broadcasted on YouTube for others to share with if you want to share your presence. And with that, I'd like to welcome you all as well. If there are any further questions from your audience about your projects or your companies or your knowledge, to join us on Discord afterwards, if you have the time between all your projects, of course. So I thank you again. I wish you all a pleasant morning, evening, or afternoon, depending on where you're located.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Robert, for the invite. Bye, everybody.
Ciao.
electronicexplorations.org